GlobeSpan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. GlobeSpan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. GlobeSpan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana.
This land is our land now.
As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. GlobeSpan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
We ain't giving up no river that belong to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain.
Good evening to all of our Guyanese viewers. I am Nohar Singh, the host for tonight's program. GlobeSpan, a platform that is been in its 6th year, offering community service for all voices. The platform invites all political parties, civil and religious leaders to share their opinions and address concerns. You can contact GlobeSpan 24/7 by calling 631-782-8684 or email us at support@globespan247.com. Our topic tonight, 20 plus political parties plus crossovers. Is our political landscape shifting? That is our topic tonight. Our guests are no other than Mr. Vincent Alexander, who is not new to this platform. He's been frequenting this platform for the past couple of years. We welcome him and appreciate his participation. We also have Mr. Ravi Dev, formerly the leader and former MP for Roar. Ravi also has been on this platform for many years, and we are all trying to have a dialogue, discuss, bring forward opinions from different sides, and to be able to sort of enlighten each other of a different type of conversation that we've been trying to have on GlobeSpan. So the first thing I would like to do tonight is probably, if we don't mind, probably just take 1 minute silence for Miss Adriana Young. She was laid to rest over the weekend. And I think this is an incident that brought the nation and to a larger extent, people on a global scale, brought them into this entire incident. So if everyone don't mind, we just take a 1 minute silence in honor of Miss Adriana Young. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we want to get started with our program. I want to start tonight with Mr. Ravi Dev. He's been in the political landscape on the political scene for many years, and I wanted to ask him to comment on the different changes that's taken place in our political landscape, and is our political landscape shifting? Mr. Ravidev?
Well, thank you, Nohar, for inviting me on to be a panelist tonight with the eminent Mr. Vincent Alexander. But I'd like to begin by greeting, of course, all of our viewers out there, but to say that today is especially poignant in terms of Adriana, because today the grade 6, the national grade 6 assessment results were announced, and she had written that assessment exams, and she earned a space at Leonora Secondary School. It is especially poignant because the grade 6 is seen as a precursor to the next stage of her life. And that life, of course, was snuffed out. And I again want to exhort the authorities that whatever ambiguities as to how she exactly died ought to be cleared up. I think we owe it to her memory, to the memory of all of our youth who should go on to develop. Now, to the topic in terms of what the title, the political landscape was chosen, and whether that landscape is shifting or changing. The word landscape, of course, is one that brings to picture, something physical out there, and some of us may see landscape as never changing, but it always changes. And it can be changed in several ways. It can change to inherent factors that make up that landscape. A volcano can explode, and that whole landscape can be changed when the ashes, fall and develop a whole new vegetation. That landscape can be changed by individuals who can plant trees. I recently went up to England for a vacation with the family, England and Scotland. And it was interesting how they have manicured their landscape. You're talking of almost, hundreds of miles being literally shaped and formed hundreds of years ago when they couldn't even see what it would look like in those 100 years subsequent. So to come back to our political landscape, I think we have to see it in that sense that yes, if it's shifting or not, it has to. It is never stagnant. And we have to then look at the factors that may cause it to shift, or we may look at factors that we should consciously shift that landscape if the landscape is not conducive to our own existence, because a landscape in and of itself doesn't do anything for us. It is how we can utilize what is in that landscape. So to come back to our political landscape, to continue the analogy, yes, it has shifted over the years, and it is shifting. That is my very short answer. But I would like that to connect it to something Vincent and I were talking just before the program started of this young man, Mamdani, who just won the Democratic primary in New York City. But his father, he's a scholar that goes back to Uganda and was very much involved in the political landscape of the Eastern Africa. And those were very seminal to our development in Guyana. For example, Nyerere in Tanzania, his Arusha Declaration, to a great extent influenced Mr. Burnham's Sophia Declaration in Guyana, and had a tremendous influence. So Mamdani had a commentary on that political landscape as to what may have constituted it. And I think it's fortuitous. Maybe we can use Mamdani's formulation, which is that they are ideological elements that may cause that landscape to change, the whole belief system, but as an ism, as an ideology that can cause it to change. For example, when Mr. Burnham and Dr. Jagan back in the 60s helped to shape our political landscape away from what the British had bequeathed. They made a conscious decision to change the political landscape, and Mr. Burnham was accused of Dr. Jagan of not going far enough. The one would be a more gradualist approach, which was taken by some other parties out there who said that our landscape should evolve in a more natural or in a more calmer way rather than things. So I would like to put this at that yes, there are changes in the landscape is shifting, but we shouldn't just look at the surface. We should look at what is impelling those changes and try then to project what is happening going forward, or what may happen going forward.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Raviji. And gentlemen, just a quick note. If we could try to keep the comments to 3 minutes, max 4, so that we could be able to get more questions and have more of an interactive program. I certainly want to be able to get some of the comments in as well from some of our viewers. We welcome all of our viewers from Canada, United States, Guyana, and all over the world. Mr. Alexander, you have been around many years. You're a veteran in the political on the political scene. You've seen many things that many of us still have not been able to understand fully. What's your take on the landscape? And when I say the landscape, I'm taking in context 59 years. And most of the time when I'm on GlobeSpan, I'm not only speaking about present, but I'm also trying to incorporate our history in this. So tell me, Mr. Alexander, what is your take in this?
First of all, good evening to your viewers. When I talk about the landscape, I would like to equate it to a stage on which a dramatic act is playing out. And that's the act of political life, so to speak, in this instance. So that on that stage, in the first instance, you have actors. And I think in our circumstance, we are referring to political parties and specific political actors as the ones who are occupying that landscape. But the landscape is not static. It's a landscape on which things are changing, both in terms of occupation. In other words, you may have quantitative change in terms of the number of occupants on that landscape. And on that landscape, you have an interaction of the actors. And the actors portraying their being and an interaction among the actors. And therefore, the change may also be viewed from the standpoint not only of those who are occupying the stage, but the way in which they're occupying the stage in terms of the roles they're playing, in terms of their thoughts and their values and their beliefs that they bring to that stage and play those things out in their actions. So yes, as we look at this topic, I think we have to, on one hand, look to see what has happened on that landscape in terms of the physical occupation, but we also have to look to see what has happened on that landscape in terms of the relational occupation, the interaction among the forces. And indeed, as we do that, we have to look to see what influences those relations, what causes a particular occupant to behave in a particular way on that landscape.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Raviji, we've grown up knowing two main political parties, and the country has been pretty much for all of these years, only basically looked towards these two political parties. Roe came up, AFC came up, but we have never really seen anything like this. 20 plus, some people are saying 20 something, 25 political parties that's looking to contest this next election. Are we at the crossroad, Raviji? Do you feel that we're at a point in our history where we're shifting?
I would like to believe so, Nohar. I do believe, because objectively, coming back to Vincent's analogy of a stage and its actors, a stage also contains props. And those props in which the actor moves around and interact, it influences them. And I would like to stress that in politics, it is the institutional framework that constitutes the stage in which those actors behave and interact. And therefore, we have to look at those institutional structures, the rules of the game, and then see what exactly is shifting and why. Not just the actors, because the actors are influenced by ideological constructs in their head that Mamdani talks about, and also what is outside the institutional rules of the game, so to speak. So to make it concrete, we grew up in a British system in which we were tutored by the British, and they said we were not ready to govern ourselves for hundreds of years, and we were being tutored to govern ourselves. So in a sense, they were not only setting the stage, but creating the stage. And Mamdani has a very interesting phrase he used. We have heard the phrase divide and rule. Mamdani talks about define and rule. Because what the British did to divide us, he defined us. So we came out of the colonial experience as not as a Guyanese people. We were not a nation, but we simply got a state in which a nation was to be constituted. So we saw ourselves as Indians, as Africans. In fact, we proudly were told we are a land of 6 peoples. So the logic of that definition, the politicians, that first generation of politicians, had to deal with that. And I've written time and again that we may blame those politicians for dividing us, but it's rather unfair because those divisions were there and the politicians had to deal with them. So take, for example, Mr. Burnham, who we know was ushered in almost by the colonials in that first coalition with the UF. But when Burnham went to his constituency, it was a constituency of primarily African Guyanese. And I would like to close with this, where we said they had what we call an ethnic security dilemma. That by then we saw that the Guyanese electorate there was a tendency to vote ethnically by their ethnic origins. So African Guyanese felt, with a lot of justification, if that is how the game is going to be played, they would be excluded from power. And therefore, democracy to them was not that meaningful. So Burnham had to deal with that, Jagan have to deal with that, and today we will have to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Raviji. Thank you. Mr. Alexander, GlobeSpan for these 6 years have been trying to have this ethnic discussion where we are speaking with each other, not at each other. And you have stayed on this program, Raviji has stayed on this program, Dr. Betaram has stayed on this program. But I want to kind of guide my question away a little from that. And by the way, I think I've mentioned in the past that, when you first came on this program, Mr. Alexander, every few comments was attacking you in every manner. That is pretty much subside. We've got those 1-2 still talking about the rig election, etc. But shifting away a little from that, Raviji spent some time on the colonial days, the British and the ethnic dilemma, etc. You have seen a lot under the sun. And as a young man growing up in Guyana and coming to bearing in terms of this, on this political scene, what's happening with all of these formation of political parties and these different actors, as you, both of you, as refer them to be? Is this something that is coming to where it's giving you a sense of hope as a Guyanese that maybe from all of this will come out a leader or a group or a coalition or a government, be it PPP, PNC, or a coalition, that where the country could have more hope going forward?
I must confess that for me, the change we are witnessing today is more quantitative than qualitative. Because notwithstanding the contention that we haven't had this number of parties in the past, if we look back, we've always had a number of parties other than the two main, or I may even say at one time the three main parties. We've always had a number of parties being involved on the political landscape. And the question is, what's so different about that history of involvement from what we are seeing now? And it is that answer that will tell you if there is real change in terms of something qualitative new emerging. And I must confess, I do not see a significant qualitative change occurring in terms of the actors and what's motivating the actors. Of course, the point Ravi made of the props. The props are presenting scenarios in which things are being played out, but the props are not themselves fundamental or foundational in terms of the behavior patterns that are there. It is just a kind of a pragmatism and a strategic approach to the props on the landscape. So, you know, we have had in the past political parties that have taken on different forms and different shapes and different purposes. And to a large extent, we've seen these parties either being sometimes like movements. They have a particular agenda, not necessarily a complete total developmental and national agenda, but they may have a sectoral agenda that they're pursuing. So that is one element, and one may well argue that even today that we have a reoccurrence of that. Whether we like it or not, we've had parties that in some regards have also pursued religious agendas, or they have represented religious groups in our society. And I don't think that that is necessarily completely waned. We look at the landscape now, we can probably still see some of that occurring. We've had parties that have represented individuals who have felt that they hadn't had the opportunity to really to grow on the political landscape because they're suffocated by their involvement in a particular party. And so you have individuals like those who are not necessarily different in terms of their ideologies, but want to be more active on the landscape. And so for me, yes, there is change. And I go back to what I said initially. The number of parties now are far more than they have ever been, but the motivation for their existence, I think there isn't much different now for the motivation. In fact, if there's anything different, I would put it on the negative side, because I think that in the past, with a small number of parties, there was a lot that was illogical about those parties, even as they conflated with the ethnicity. And so one could clearly see a PPP that was Marxist, so to speak, a PNC that was less Marxist, a UF that was capitalist. But I'm not seeing that clear ideological difference these days in terms of these parties. They're not coming forth in clear ideological terms. They're coming forth more in, on one hand, in terms of individuals seeking to pursue their own, to some extent, even their own interests. They're seen in terms of parties that are representing interest groups, and some parties that are representing a movement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alexander. Thank you. But I just want to say it's good that we could agree to disagree as well. For many of us, we are looking for hopes. We understand that some of them may not be aligned with the ideology of everyone. And of course, many of them have not come out with their manifestos yet. So we really clearly cannot define them how qualitative they will be, to use your word. So, but there, we are looking for hopes in this nation, a nation that we have been for these 59 years, have a lot of broken promises, a lot of people that are very disenchanted across the board. I mean, across the all racial lines. So yeah, looking for some hopes to come out of all of this. I just want to reinstate some of GlobeSpan goals, some of our visions, and we are asking our dear Guyanese brothers and sisters to help us, to join with us, because we are looking to help build a society that is much more informed from all sides. Now, I know most of you tend to look at programs where you have just individuals or folks just from one side of the aisle. And what GlobeSpan is trying to do is to bring in discussions from all sides and thereby giving you more information to make much more informed decisions. We're also looking to build a society where one can change from it within. And what we're trying to say there is that none of us are perfect. If we look to change from within, then we could affect change from the outside, and a society that where we could reason together. None of us are 100% correct all the time. If we can reason and understand the cost of what we are deciding to do or the course that we take in this nation, understanding the cost of that can also help us to achieve much more. And a society that can work to keep hope alive. We need to keep hope alive, particularly for the next generation. Ravi Dev and Mr. Alexander and Dr. Betoram, many times they've been on this program. They refer a lot to the British. Ravi, forgive me, but I have to say the British has left us in so much many years ago, and in so much that the responsibilities are on the nation now and our people to move forward. So our vision is a country where its moral and ethical compass are directed by the word of God. Help us to build a Guyana where Afro, Indo, Amerindians, and all races value each other as equal human beings. Imagine a Guyana where her wealth becomes your wealth. So those are some of the goals and vision for GlobeSpan, and we really want to ask our brothers and sisters to join with us in continuing to build this goal out. It has been 6 years, and we want to be able to continue. Going to the crossovers, Raviji, we've known of the word namakarams when someone crosses over to another political parties. There many times there are, of course, as Mr. Alexander has pointed out, private interests. There is also, in the mix of all of that, the ungrateful and the private interest, etc., there's also conviction. And are there convictions with some of these crossovers? And we could go back essentially recently to the Moses Nagamutu and to the Kim Rajam Jatan, back forward to Miss Amanza and some of the changes that we've seen back and forth. What do you make of all of this, and does it help us to build a stronger democracy?
I'll have to time you with that 3 minute, Nohar.
I knew you were coming back with that.
I think you way exceeded that. But be as it may, you see, I take what you say with all due respect, and don't feel that I'm being dismissive. But your topic here is about politics. And politics, I want to emphasize, has its own logic. Politics has its own logic. And if you're going to be involved in politics, you ignore that logic to your own detriment. Coming back to the British left us a landscape that we still have to navigate, which is we have a parliamentary system where you have to agglomerate 50% of the vote to take office. I'm not even saying the word power. You have to get 50% plus one of the vote to get office. And then, and only then, you can do all the good things that you talked about and and all of us aspire to. So before you can get to that, you have to first get power. And therefore, we have to cross that first stage. And that's where we are. And that is where I want to say, well, where do we stand now? We started out voting ethnically. And by and large, I think this is what Vincent implied. I want to say it, and you can tell me no if it isn't. That by and large, that qualitative nature of our politics remains in place. By and large, that's how individuals still see their interest, and politicians have to work with that. But as I have been pointing out over the years, the demographics of Guyana has changed, where you don't have any one group possessing the majority that Mr. Burnham created. Therefore, there is much more flexibility in terms of how you can maneuver for votes. But you can do what you want with all the permutations and combination. Your goal must be to get 50% plus one. And that is why every one of the articles that I write weekly, I am almost throwing up my hand in despair at the behavior of the opposition in not following through with that logic. The question for the opposition has to be, how are they going to agglomerate that 50% plus one? And forming 28 parties, 27 the PPP being one, is not going to do it. So when I look, and we talked about whether it is Nimakaram or what kind of behavior, I see to a great extent individuals looking at their personal interests rather than the societal interests or even the group that they purport to represent. So we have some individuals walking out of the PNC, but they didn't, because they didn't get a position. Now, I'm not saying individuals must not be accommodated, but I would like to see those individuals just leave because they didn't get a big job. So, and I am very cynical about it. I see them trying to split up something they don't possess. First, you got to get office, get power, and then you can talk about going forward. So coming back to where I think we need to think is to look, if we want to call names or what have you. But no one can tell me at this junction that the PNC still does not represent the second largest force, or possibly the largest force. When Mr. Burnham formed the PNC, he crafted an agglomeration of different interests. People forget that Mr. Burnham consciously courted John Carter and his League of Colored People. I forget the name of the UDP or something like that, United Democratic Party. Right. And there was Mr. Koyana at that time, Sidney King, with his Africanist tendencies. So it was, and then you had Jainarine Singh and Lashman Singh. These were people who were supposed to represent different interests and put it together to agglomerate that 50% plus one. At this juncture, I think, especially in the opposition, because the PPP, to its credit, has kept their eyes on the prize. As to whether they are doing it opportunistically or what have you. In politics, we don't look at motives. We look at intent, and we impute your intent based on your action. They've literally gone out there, and you may say they're buying votes, they're securing whatever you want to use, but they're working towards getting their 50% plus one. And I see the opposition with this 27 parties out there simply fragmenting themselves and not keeping themselves on the prize, and they're going to guarantee themselves being out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Raviji, permit me to make a couple of comments there. One is that you mentioned that politics has its own logic, and I know the great famous Mr. Basde Pandey has always talked about politics have its own morale. Forgive me for not subscribing to that, because I feel that if anyone
When you say it
wants
doesn't
to
have
get-
its own logic or moral, which you want? There's two different things. The logic of politics has nothing to do with moral or
I understand
immoral.
that, but no, what I
It's
said is
numbers.
that, yeah, I separated it too. I said
So
said,
but I want to understand you. You're saying that politics, the logic of politics to agglomerate numbers, you disagree with that?
no, not in terms of gathering numbers.
Okay, good.
What
But
I'm
you're now
on a broader
imputing
context.
morality, and I'm saying that's not our discussion here. We got to talk about numbers. Politics is about numbers, and start there, and then you move on.
Well, in a
Because
broader context.
you're dividing 35% and 65% of what? Of zero? Well, what's this nonsense? Let's first get the 50% plus one, and then we can talk, or at least present a plan, a logic. And I don't see that logic playing out right now.
So you don't see in any of this that where any of these individuals are looking to move forward with a political organization that doesn't fall in any of that context in gathering numbers?
No, I see them in negotiating with the PNC, which is the largest bloc, and it is the logic of numbers. Mr. Aubrey Norton is the leader of the largest party outside of the PPP, and based on the demographics of Guyana, that constituency between the African Guyanese and the colored Guyanese and the Amerindians, they constitute a majority in Guyana today. So if the individuals who are now jumping into the ring with all their parties, if they were to follow the logic of numbers, they would work with Mr. Aubrey Norton to put together a coalition to gain office, and then let's talk, let's go forward. But they're
So just to
dipping
be-
up something that's not there.
And again, just for clarity purpose, for my sake here, is that what you're saying is that they should stay the party line because the numbers dictate, but not their conviction, not their understanding of what the policies are or the leadership of that specific
Well,
party.
that is my frustration. In coalition building, which is what you need, and which Mr. Burnham was a master practitioner about informing the first PNC, there's something called a coalition of convenience versus a coalition of commitment. And so you may call it morality. We don't use the word morality. Right? It's a commitment. What are you committed towards? I am yet to hear any one of these grasshoppers telling Mr. Aubrey Norton that we are not committed to any particular goal of the PNC. I'm still to wait that we don't agree with your ideology, we don't agree with your economic development, we don't agree with whatever. All I'm hearing, I want 65%, you want 35%, I didn't get a big job, I was not recognized. That's all I'm hearing.
Well, moving on to Mr. Alexander. Mr. Alexander, how do you feel about some of these political actors exiting? Is it conviction, or is it they're looking for their own political sort of personal gains here?
Let me respond to that, first of all, by following through on what Ravi has said. Ravi talks about an opposition as if there is some homogeneous set of people or homogeneous group called an opposition. And is frustrated that they are not acting in homogeneity. I don't think that is a homogeneous group. And therefore, I cannot simply juxtapose the opposition to the PPP. In terms of our government structure or governance structure, yes, there is a government and there is quote unquote a so-called opposition. But in terms of the actual body politics, I don't subscribe to them as a homogeneous group. And historically, they have not been a homogeneous group. So that when you talk about this opposition that Ravi is talking about, you can talk about a gap, which really, in some regards, is amorphous. A gap which historically seems to be a group that represents Amerindian interests. And they don't necessarily get involved in whether they're socialists or they're capitalists. Historically, the UF was capitalist, but a gap, Amerindian interests. So, and you have other groups. If you take a Bandu, who is a part of the opposition landscape, so to speak, you don't see homogeneity, and therefore what Ravi is talking about speaks to, and he himself may have said it, a question of convenience. How do we get the government out? But in getting this government out, how convenient is that to groups which are so different, and in some instances which are not necessarily significantly different from the government? How do we see them coming together as homogeneous opposition? Because when we look to the history of these parties, and 2020 is a good example. 2020, one could probably say, well, the PNC and the WPA and probably AFC may in some regards represent some homogeneous group. But when one goes beyond that to look at the wider configuration, you had ANOG, you had TNM, and these groups, some of which are, I think they start off from a position of not necessarily agreeing in totality with what the PPP is doing, but having a greater negative disposition to the PNC. You know, and that is what would allow Kisoon to end up where she ended up, and a Schumann to end up where he ended up, so that you don't have the objective circumstances for these groups to do what Ravi is saying they should be doing. They're driven largely by subjective circumstances, and those subjective circumstances don't necessarily bring them together. Subjective circumstances could bring them together. So, for example, it could have brought the AFC and the PPP together and the PNC together on the contention that, look, we want the government out. And so they get the government out. But what they represent and what they want for the country and all of that then could well create immediately at this juncture that doesn't take the country anywhere, because they are not that conglomerate moving the country forward collectively. They themselves then become competitive in terms of the differences, the fundamental differences among them. So I understand your point in terms of ideals for Guyana, but I think even as one looks to ideals, one has to look to those ideals in relation to what our reality is. And our reality is, I think at this point in time, that you have a People's Progressive Party that has been able to maintain largely its base. For whatever reason they have done that, they've been able to maintain their base. A People's Progressive Party that recognizes that there are people out there who have interests and therefore would pragmatically work with them, and therefore those people are not necessarily a part of this opposition, so to speak. And that, again, Noah, I have to come back to something which you, in some regards, would like us to stay away from. In our society, in a large measure, the ethnic psyches still drive our people. And I would contend that in that regard, there is more homogeneity in the ethnic psyche of the Indo-Guyanese that allow them to remain largely where they are. That is sometimes affected by class differences, and I think that is what happened in the earlier stages with Jainarayan Singh and Lakshman Singh. Those were class differences. And I would say that even in the Height era, there were those who were still stridently communists, and there were those Indo-Guyanese who, some of them gravitated to the PNC on ideological grounds. But as soon as the PPP came into power, it was clear that the PPP was not going to pursue anti-capitalist economic policies. Those persons became neutral and or went back to the PPP. I don't want to call names, but I can identify prominent persons who are in the PNC.
Call Vincent.
No, I don't want to call names. Prominent persons in the PNC who I think were there for ideological reasons. But once the ideological reason no longer existed, they went back. So that largely we are divided from the standpoint of what our psyche is. And here I would contend that the people of African descent, the homogeneity has a lot to do with history, the fact that they were all enslaved and all of that. And it has a lot to do with when they perceive that their backs are up against the wall. But outside of that, they are not that homogeneous. And that has to do with where they came from in terms of the different groups that came. And it has to do with the fact that not being homogeneous, they've had to find different paths for self-realization. And those different parts of self-realization do not all coincide and collide. And that speaks to the way in which their psyche is different and allows for the kind of fragmentation that Bradley suggested that exists. But that's a reflection of the reality of the evolution of the Guyanese society and the evolution in its disaggregated form between the different ethnic groups.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Alexander. And I'm just trying to get to understand this much more clearer and simplify it. Based on what Raviji mentioned, the numbers are not dictating for them to move away from these main political parties. And am I correct to say, Raviji, that you're saying that they're moving away for their own personal agenda?
See, Vincent is talking about homogeneity as something given. I am saying, of course, people are different in their makeup, in their orientation, in the interests they see. But to me, the political logic at this juncture, they're outside of the PPP. We have to start there. And in that
Right.
sense, they are opposition. Now, for them to become an effective opposition and not just making noises, political logic dictates that they should now, and this is the word, they should now be negotiating with the PNC on the terms of their engagement to present a unified front. And I use that word front, and Vincent would know that these fronts that these communist fellows used to put out. So no, joking aside, this is my frustration. They're not homogeneous to begin with, or else we wouldn't have a problem here. They'll all be one.
Yeah.
But
So-
there has to be what we call a brassage, a churning, and that comes in the negotiation.
Yeah.
But my frustration is that the negotiation, as far as we were privy to, did not in any occasion center on points of views, whether economic policies, social policies, whatever cultural policies. No, all it focused on, for what we are hearing, was how much I'm going to get and how much you're going to get. And I think with that kind of thinking, they won't get anything. That, as we say in Ghana, they will lose corn and they will lose husk.
Well,
Let,
Ravi,
let me
Mr.
jump in,
Alexander,
let me jump in, Nohar, to say this, that one of the difference between myself and Ravi in this discourse is, and Ravi's probably been responsive to what you have put on the table, is that Ravi is focusing on a lot, implicitly he's focusing on what has occurred between the PNC, so to speak, or the APNU, if you want to say that, and the AFC. And I am going to be beyond that in my focus, in terms of that set of people he's referring to as the opposition. So that's I think one difference that we have here. And I want to restate that whilst I understand what Ravi is saying in terms of being in the opposition and wanting to occupy space and therefore having to be quote unquote pragmatic and get involved in a collision of convenience, I think that we have to understand that people are largely driven by their psychological dispositions. And therefore, unless people have some commonality in that regard, then you're not going to get that logic that Ravi is looking for, because they are not driven by the logic. They're driven by their psyche. And if their psyche does not facilitate the logic, then the basis for them to work together a priori does not necessarily exist. And so when they come to the table, they come into the table presenting to you that they want to acquire power and all of that, but they are guided by something that conflicts in some regards with that coming together, because they are not naturally not together.
Yeah. So I want to move away from the point, but I just want to make a couple more comments before I move on. One is that the topic for tonight is there a shift taking place in our political landscape? And what I'm trying to bring out here as well, and I understand what Raviji is saying about the numbers, what it would dictate its own logic, and Mr. Alexander, but we are assuming as well that their psyche or their own personal subjective reasons is why they're moving. And we're not taking into the assumption it could be a conviction of a vision for the nation, or change in the way things are going. If we are to go with the logic of staying with the main political parties because the number dictates that, and go against our conviction of what our vision is, there in itself, we would have a dichotomy. So I feel very strongly that I hear both of your points, and I do want to move on to another part of this. Devin, if you have that video on the
No, just let me make one little point there, because I think you've touched an important issue. And I think Ravi is saying what I'm going to say in some regard. There isn't a manifest conviction in terms of here is what they want for Guyana.
That's
There isn't
it.
a manifest conviction. And
None.
therefore, you can't expect them to behave in a way that is not representative of their thought process. Their thought process is not revealing. None of them have come to us with a program and a conviction that says, politically, here's the system we want. Economically, here's the system we want. Culturally, here's what we want.
That's right.
Alexander,
They haven't done that.
No, but Mr. Alexander, in answering you on that, I did mention a few minutes ago that they have not presented their manifesto. So we have not
But they
been
don't
able
have to present a manifesto for us to see that. Once they open the mouth as the politicians, what they say must be a manifestation of those things.
Yes.
To a certain extent, but in terms of incorporating the entire vision. But let's move on from this, because I do have a few more points that I want to get across. Entry level into politics. To get into forming a political organization and being able to be in the public space on a platform, there's a certain amount of hurdles you have to get across. And this has been status quo on all sides for most of our history, I would say. Devin, do you have that video on that Glenn Lal interview from Kaichor?
Local businessman Glenn Lal said that the government has been practicing political gangsterism against persons who condemn its actions in office. They all see it, every single one of them. They read the headlines, they know the numbers, they know exactly who is walking away with riches or wealth. But they stay silent, not because they don't care, but because they are afraid of what happens when you speak the truth in a country that makes you the enemy of those in power.
Thank you there, Devin. But just before I move to my question there, I want to also point out to our viewers that at GlobeSpan, we don't have all that noise that you would be used to. We would not have all that cussing out. We are trying to create and keep and sustain a platform whereby everyone could have their differences of discussions and be able to have more of a mature approach to the situations or the issues or the problems that we are facing as Guyanese. And that's what GlobeSpan is trying to do. We are trying to avoid the noise. And I don't know of any better way to put that. But going back to that video just now and leading up to my question and going to Ravi G. Ravi, when you started out with Roar, there were people protesting in front of your homes. You were threatened. You went through the mills, as we would call them, and you graduated into parliament from that. We are seeing now in the political landscape, of course, that there are also very different actors per se. What would be your what would be, I don't want to use the word advice, but what would be your comments toward that, given the fact that you went through similar situations?
Well, let me just say that historically, our politics is playing hardball politics. You know, growing up, I don't know if Vincent played ball out in Townside there where the streets are narrow, but out here we had a lot of room, and softball was a thing, you get me? But Guyana politics, to be serious, is hardball politics. And we found that out, and I don't think much has changed, whether in the rhetoric, whether in the approach. It's an in-your-face kind of politics. So as President Truman said way back, in Guyana, we have to heed his advice. If you can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen. Politics in Guyana is hardball politics. So learn how to deal with it. and you can't be, crying at the and wimping out and walking out, as I see some people walking out because they were not addressed, I don't know, by Mr. or Mrs. and they walk out of the party and form a new party and all of that. So that's my first advice. You got to be thick-skinned and you got to be ready to mix it up, as they say. The other thing would be, and this is what Vincent said, and I totally agree, and I would say it in so many which way. When you speak, Guyana, I don't want to say we still are practicing doctor politics, as Dr. Lloyd Best said way back, that in the Caribbean, we practice doctor politics, meaning that your politics has to have some kind of theory. That is what we are used to in the Caribbean. We're not, I don't want to put down any other region, but you have to understand that we have politicians starting with Dr. Eric Williams, who out of Oxford wrote something called Capitalism and Slavery, that the whole world had to grapple with, to look at slavery from a different standpoint in how it built England and so on and so forth. And we have continued that tradition, and it is to our credit, because it shows you, unlike animals, we are humans, and animals simply react, but humans think, and then they act. They don't react, they think. There's that intermediary stage. And coming back to what Vincent said, I don't see the thought in all of these 28 parties that have fissioned the opposition. I don't see where they're coming from. I am yet to say, do they have a different viewpoint? Chetty critiqued Burnham. They had this discussion who was Menshevik and who was Bolshevik, and they knew what they were talking about because they had a vocabulary. I don't hear anybody criticizing. Again, I come back to the PNC as the larger party there, right? And I don't see them accepting the political logic that there's something in politics and political coalitions called a disproportion of size. They got to be, in some way, some commensurate acknowledgement in divvying up whatever there is to your size. You can't, as Aubrey said in one thing, just drop from some tree and think you're going to come dictate to me what it ought to be. You get me? So that is the second lesson, that if you come to the electorate, you must come with some degree of that there's something in your head as to how you will develop. You've used the word. We want to develop Guyana. We have 60 years of stagnation. At long last, we have the wherewithal to do so. So come to the people with a plan. And I'm saying this this is what I discovered in dealing with the people and working at the grassroots from one end of Guyana to the other, including during my coalition with GAP, going into the hinterland and so on. Our people are not stupid people. They are very politically aware, and they were called precocious as far back as the 60s in terms of politics, and they still understand. So I feel a lot of these 28 parties will simply disappear like snow on a hot day like you're getting in New York City when this election is over, because the people have not seen the difference, the convictions that you're talking about in their articulation of what they stand for. All they hear is how much they want.
And Raviji, I have to also again stress how much I'm in disagreement with those comments, given the fact that these parties just basically started to take formation. They have not presented themselves on all the platforms. I understand what you're saying about the logic and the numbers. However, if I understand what you're saying, they should be staying with their main political parties. And that's what we have been doing for 59 years. PPP stay with PPP, PNC stays with PNC, and things have not changed for us. So as part of GlobeSpan, I am looking for some hope. And what I mentioned earlier in starting of this program, that out of all these political parties, maybe a phoenix will rise, that we would get a political actor, or we could get someone that has their vision and they care for the people. We will never get there And I actually don't want to use the word never. We may not get there in a timely manner if we have to continuously just toe the political line of the main political parties that we believe in. Now, we will never even get to a coalition government country, and we'll end up back with winner takes all. And that's where we are at. So how do we get to the next step is what I'm trying to bring out in this program here, that yes, you may feel that they did not articulate their vision as well, but we have not given them that chance yet. So in my view, it's a bit premature. I'm hoping that you're incorrect for the sake of the country, not for the sake of the discussion, for the sake of the people of Guyana, that we are all incorrect, and from all of these political parties, and even from within the main political parties, because you have some very bright, honest, decent people in each one of these parties, in the PPP, in the PNC. And I'm sure that they also want to be able to take some sort of a stronger position in which way the country goes. And I guess that's what we're trying to reach out to. So, Mr. Alexander, I took up more than my 3 minutes there probably, but I want to come to you on this. Given all of the hurdles that anyone has to face in this political climate, or in our political climate as we have known it in the past, the badgering, the propaganda, the accusations, the character assassinations, given all of that within our political space, how would you be able to, being a veteran of the political scene, how could you advise these new political actors, and withstanding what we have just discussed about their vision, etc., or their own personal reasons, how would you advise them to go forward?
Well, the first thing I would say is, if you're getting involved in politics, then your commitment has to be manifest in your behavior. Because if you get involved in politics and you're talking about good governance and honesty and anti-corruption and all of that, then you yourself, you've got to be clean so that you could withstand the garbage that will be thrown at you. And so I think that is one of the starting points. You made some comments earlier about my own being. I would be a bit on the egotistical side tonight and say that I can stand where I stand, because no matter what Jagdio says about the prodigy and 100 million, that the people know that that is not true, right? And so when you're getting involved, you got to come with your hands clean so that you're not affected by the kind of propaganda, the kind of baggage that can be thrown at you. And I think in some regards, that's where you must start. Secondly, you can't come to the people without saying to them, what is it you have to offer? Now, you were saying, well, they haven't had the time as yet to do so. But you have to come to them saying, what is it you have to offer? And they will then look to see who you have been or who you are, to see if there is a commitment to what is it you're telling them. Because in Guyana, one of the problems we have is a large part of our population say, don't worry them politicians. They're making promises, but they're not committed to the promises that they're making. And so though you have lots of people voting, they don't necessarily vote because they have a belief in the promises made, because manifestly those promises are not going to be kept. But they vote for other reasons. One of it is ethnic stuff. One of it is that they feel that they too can get involved in a manipulation of the system to their individual benefit and things like that. And a large number of people are left out of the equation on the grounds that what is this politics about? There's nothing that we have to get out of it because these politicians are really just manipulating us in their personal interest. So these people who you hope will present a difference, have to present a difference by, first of all, articulating a difference. They have to present a difference by manifesting in terms of what they have done so far, that they are in fact different, and therefore are not affected. Because if the people believe you are different, then the propaganda would not have the impact. And also, they have to be prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, because things are going to happen in the political arena that are going to put you into a difficult situation, sometimes materially a difficult situation, and sometimes in terms of mental health, a difficult situation, in terms of security, a difficult situation. And you have got to be disposed to understanding that those difficulties are the hurdles that you have got to overcome if you are to pursue what it is you articulated.
Yeah.
So you have to accept that those difficulties are a part for the course.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to confront them from a standpoint of your own confidence, your own commitment, and your own preparedness to pay the price.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ravaji certainly graduated from that school. He ended up being a member of parliament, having withstand all of those type of pressure. And one couple of comments I need to read. Mr. Kisundial, Mr. Kisundial, Nohar is trying to make virtue out of political selfishness by some splinter groups. I just want Mr. Kisundal to say that I'm just looking to try to find hopes among the political actors. Mr. Barry Sanchara wrote, Nohar, a man was sanctioned by the USA, is running for president. What do you want the people to elect him and become a failure like Venezuela? Keep quoting Glenn Lau, this man is a failed program. I just want that person to know as well. We're not trying to endorse any specific political parties here. What GlobeSpan is trying to do is to bring out the conversation whereby we could have some encouragement so that there could be changes in our horizon. Changes from what? So let me just go through that list of changes that, where we have been. And both of you gentlemen, you are getting younger, as you know. And I think you should really take heed to some of the things I'm saying. Our country is mostly divided. We are split among the races, as you guys have pointed out over and over on this GlobeSpan program. Our resources, our oil and our gold contracts are highly questionable. Agriculture is at the brink. Timber, bauxite are no longer a significant factor in our country. And gentlemen, everything I'm saying here, both of you have presided over, not in the sense of dictating the outcome of anything, but has witnessed this. We also have seen our political landscape, which we just talked about, is scarred by propaganda and accusations and all the different discourse that comes in our political space. We have a massive infrastructure taking place. But our poverty level, the needle has not moved significantly. There's still people out there. And if you look at it, one of the big indicators is that we are still finding a massive amount of migrating out of the country. And again, this has all been happening not recently, but I mean, all from since the last 50-something years, what I'm talking about. We also have an atmosphere that is wreaked in corruption, nepotism, and distrust. And I'm not talking in the context of only the last 5 years, of the previous administration as well. We've had accusations on our side. We have the winner-takes-all politics. We have no checks and balances. Budgets are passed without real consultation, without real agreement among each other. We have a situation where Mr. Christopher Ram is going to court the second time around, trying to get information so he could bring clarity to issues that he basically wants to bring forward to the nation. What I'm saying is that this has been where we are at, where we have been, and how do we come out of this? And hence the reason I'm going back and forth about the small political party, hoping for there's some hope that comes out of it. Dr. Bisram, in 3-4 weeks ago, I believe it was, came out with an initiative about Guyana becoming the 51st territory governed by the jurisdiction of the United States of America. Are we really going to be, are we a failed nation? Or where are we at that where we could have our population calling for such initiative? So Raviji, I mean, do you mind talking a little? I mean, what do you think about Dr. Bisram initiative of Guyana becoming a territory of the United States?
Well, let me first of all address what you said, and you have described a litany of ailments and woes that beset Guyana. And I would think that if any one of these 27 parties had come out and made an exposition such as you have done, maybe we would be getting somewhere, because they wouldn't just have that litany of woes. We would be hoping that they would say what they plan on doing about it. But that is not what we are getting. All we are getting is that how many seats they should get in parliament, what percentage of of cabinet ministers they should have, and all of that. So I think, Nohar, with all due respect, I know it's fun intended. I think maybe you ought to enter the political realm and articulate, as you have done, as to what ought to be, because we are not seeing it in Guyana right now. All we are seeing is showmanship and these gestures that have no foundation. Now, coming back to the initiative by Dr. Bisram, I think it is an acknowledgement of the failure of politics in Guyana. Again, I say this, I think it's an acknowledgement of the failure of politics in Guyana to have us possess the wherewithal to govern ourselves. So now it is now being suggested that we become an appendage of the United States, in whose hemisphere we exist and who wants to dominate this hemisphere. So maybe it's a type of real politic reaction to what is going on with the politics and its fragmentation in Guyana. As to how far it will go, we know that the Trump administration is in a very expansive mode in terms of expanding literally the frontiers of America. So from Greenland all the way to Mexico, and now maybe Guyana. We can't put this as beyond. Very few people would have thought that a sitting president of America would say, I want to buy Greenland. And if that can be conceived and articulated and even proposed, I don't see it so far-fetched as to this proposal by some Guyanese of that as to where it will happen. They will have to see how they take it upwards. But again, if we in Guyana don't get our political act together, this is what will happen. We'll be at the beck and call of anybody out there. And let's not forget, we have Mr. Maduro right next door, right? I was very happy finally you didn't bring this up, that finally I heard we are now vetting Venezuelan refugees and immigrants. Now, as a standard procedure, Russia did this with Ukraine in terms of sending over Russians to have a Russian dominant population next to them. Russia has done the same with the Baltic states. The Baltic states have had to stop Russians from coming in. This is now a new method of warfare to send in citizens into you. This should have been vetting. So these are all threats, but I don't hear these new saviors that you see on the horizon even addressing these things? It's not even showing up on their blip.
Yeah.
So what can I say?
Yeah. So, Mr. Hardy Flatty, the campaign will reveal what the parties have to move forward with. Abhijit, just 1 minute to answer this. I'm very curious. Mr. Christopher Ram is going to quote second time with this freedom of information issue against Mr. Ramson. Do you feel in any way in our political scene that, young Ramson has not made it, Ramson Jr. has not made it a secret that he has presidential ambition. Do you think something like this could affect Ramson Jr.? Just 1 minute on that, in his political ambition and his presidential ambition.
I don't think the two are related. I don't think the two are related. Older Ramson, whom I know very well for over 50 years now, he has his own personality and his whole way of doing things. And I think everybody in Guyana knows him. And Christopher Ram is using the judicial mechanism to get what is, the Information Act. And he's using the proper thing that if you don't, at least we have recourse to the judiciary. And as we have seen, the judiciary, by and large, has stood its ground and has handed down, I think, very good decisions. I don't think you have any problems in that area at this juncture.
Okay, all right. I know I went through a litany of events there about our state of affairs in Guyana, but on a good note, and I think you mentioned this at the beginning of the program, grade 6, we have now moved at the pass rate from 49% to 63%. That is certainly a positive news coming out for our educational department. Mr. Alexander, again, as I mentioned, you're getting younger, and I really would like to extract from you somehow some hope for a political future here, because as Ravi G have pointed out, he's not hearing what he would like to hear from these new political actors. You have also alluded to the same. But how could we encourage more of this and not have a situation where most people looking to leave, if they get the opportunity, they will leave? Or we have an initiative by Dr. Bisram calling for the United States to Guyana to become a territory of the United States. Give us some hope here, Mr. Alexander.
Let me say a couple of things. On the Ramson issue, I don't think that there's any connect between the young Ramson and the old Ramsons in terms of what the old Ramson doing impacting the future of the young Ramson. But suffice to say that I would argue that there is a generational trait vertically among the Ramsons, because I will go back to the grandfather of the young Ramson, the father of the
PNC grandfather.
The PNC grandfather, who used to be the manager of Congress Place. And if you know him, and you know his son, and you know his grandson, then they're all Ramsons, so to speak. Having said that, I think that, and I have said this before, that we really faced with a problem of growing a new generation. I don't think that we are going to get the change on this horizon, so to speak. But I think that over time, with the emergence of influential leadership and with the kind of work done in our education system, that we could grow a generation that is different. And if that generation is different, then the politics could be different. And I hold hope for this reason. I hear what people say about 2015 to 2020. But in 2015 to 2020, with Granger, in some regards, as a moral compass in this country, you could sense some change occurring in terms of how people saw life in relation to issues like corruption, morality, etc. That is what gives me hope that if on our landscape we have emerging the kind of leadership and a regime that embraces the kind of values and trajectory that the Granger regime, and I'm restricting it largely to Granger because there was a lot of problems with the rest of them, but imagine that one person could have had that influence on what was taking place in terms of governance. And I'm saying if we have a cadre like that at our helm, and if we approach the education system differently in terms of growing a new Guyana man, then there could be a difference. But this difference is not going to come about from this plethora of political actors, none of whom are articulating how we can make a difference and what the difference should be.
Yeah. So what is believed to be one of our trolls wrote, Mr. Singh wrote, "The country is not divided. Politicians are painting that picture. People have a right to choose." Not sure which country Mr. Singh lives in, but I just would like to say that we have trolls on GlobeSpan, and those folks, our viewers, understanding we welcome our trolls because they're representing special interests, and we love to see, when they make the comments, we get a kind of visibility in which way they want to steer this program. They have a way of badgering participants on the program as well. But as I have pointed out, many of the participants have been thick-skinned enough to be able to withstand that. Gentlemen, I also wanted to touch on the joiners list and the coalition, but obviously we're running out of time. We can't probably in a different program, but we need to count our cost. And what our costs are. Our generation that rose up with Forbes Burnham and Dr. J.D. Jagan, that generation itself became so splintered and went through from all sides. Africans, Indians went through a tremendous amount of hardship for those years of that generation. And then the second generation that we pretty much are in, Mr. Alexander doesn't see in this second generation right now that we have the type of political actors that could take us to that new Guyana man. I'm hoping to disagree for the sake of hope that they are, and we want to be able to certainly encourage them, as Ravi has pointed out, and you have pointed out, that they certainly need to be strong enough to withstand all the different pressures and the headwinds that they'll be facing in the political scene. But what we all could decide on here, and what we all could agree on, and including the viewers, that we need a change in the trajectory of Guyana. It is not working for anyone. It needs to work for the people in order for the people to benefit from all the resources and also for the way of life. Mr. Alexander, you just mentioned about, the morality level during the Granger's administration. I think the morality level should be across the board with every generation. And certainly I would love to talk again about some of the things that we are seeing with the vice cartel and all of that, which, in our society, in today's society, should not be the case. But I want to thank both of you gentlemen. I want to ask you, we're running out of time. We basically only have 2 minutes. Ravi, if you could just, take a minute and a half probably, and Mr. Alexander the same in your closing comments.
I just would like to conclude by saying that I understand where you're coming from, Nohar. You're a man of the cloth, and I understand your aspirations. But like I said, not that you have to give on to Caesar what is Caesar's, but Caesar does have his own logic. And coming back to my initial statement, where I said part of the landscape, that the landscape can generate its own change and like a volcano explode and change that landscape. And I think what is happening in Guyana here, there's long been a thesis that as a country develops a wider middle class, that the politics itself will change in much more positive direction. And we saw this in Trinidad, where the oil money came from the 70s and all that. And their trajectory has been much different from us. And a lot of that was because there was a much wider middle class across the board, and it tempered their politics. I would like to say that I see signs of that. I have two younger kids. They're both young professionals, and I see with their friends and the way they talk, I can see that the hope that you have is coming. I see them changing in the way they articulate in what they see and how they judge their leaders. And if the present lot, and I don't see the present lot changing anything, I see them being political hustlers. I'm being deliberately, crude here. I don't see anything coming out of this lot. And I think we will have to maybe wait a generation. Dr. King said I might not be there when we get there, but I do see the promised land.
Well, wow. So you give it in one hand and you took it back from the other hand. You give us hopes, yes, and then you took it back. They start in current times. But hopefully, Ravi Ji, that you would be wrong on the latter part of it. The former, of course, I'm in total agreement with you. And I truly appreciate this discussion with you. I mean, you're a veteran, you're an icon in our society. You're a man that has given up a lot for the sake of Guyanese. And I truly want to tell you the amount of respect and how much I admire your sacrifices and what you have done in contributing towards Guyana. I know in speaking to many, many of our Afro-Guyanese brothers, they all, most, if not all, have a tremendous respect for you. They feel that you have a clear understanding of the ethnic dilemma, as you guys mostly refer it to. Mr. Alexander, leave us with total hope. Don't give it in one hand and take it back like in the other. Leave us with
in very cryptic terms, given the time constraint. I agree with Ravi that our future relies on the emergence of re-emergence of a middle class. I would even say re-emergence of a middle class. History has shown that it's the middle class that takes you where you have to go. We have a deficit in that regard, both in terms of quantity and in terms of quality. And I think that over time, the re-emergence of the middle class can make the difference. Let me say very quickly that the issue of the joinder has been perfectly articulated by Mr. Curtis Silva in a letter. And so I will want to reference your listeners to that letter to understand the whole issue surrounding the joinder, and to say that the performance of Kurt Silva represents the possibilities of this nation. The way that young man has stood his ground, principled against all odds, losing his job and all of that, gives us some hope that we do have people out there in this growing, emergent middle class who can, in fact, make the difference.
Yeah.
So for you, there's hope.
Yeah, so viewers, Mr. Alexander is referring to the Latin Cultural News, and it's titled "Joinders List Leaves No Room for Sharing of Seats." Former GCOM legal advisor. Yes, I took a deep read earlier, and I'm taking a deeper dive in that. And I'm also going back to Dr. Terence Blackman document a few weeks ago as well. Gentlemen, I really enjoyed this. Totally appreciate, I mean, our society, of course, have grown up seeing both of you in the political sphere, and us, and of course, the younger generation are looking for hopes. Count the cost, let's reason together, and let's treat each other as human beings. Devin Bissoon, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And to all our viewers, have a good night.
Good night, guys. Take care.
Good night.